Welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Show podcast. Today, we are joined by Savannah Seydel, VP of Sustainability and Impact at Better Earth. Savannah is going to share some practical insights on reducing costs, minimizing food waste, and implementing sustainable practices for restaurants. Savannah, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's so nice to be back with y'all. Thank you for having me.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute. I think the last time you were on the show was back in December of 2023. I'm sure a lot has happened in your world at Better Earth. There's a lot of exciting things to talk about. Before we dive in though, Savannah, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your journey to your position at Better Earth?
I'd be happy to. So I am, the vice president of sustainability at Better Earth, and we are a 100% compostable food service packaging company. We're on a mission to really address the plastic pollution crisis. Right now, if plastic were a country, it would be the fifth largest polluter in the world. and within the United States, where I am, packaging represents a third of municipal landfills. So there's a huge opportunity to bend the needle and change things for the food service industry. So we offer rapidly renewable plant-based alternatives to single-use plastic. So a range of food service options. And I came to the role in a pretty roundabout way. I've always been incredibly passionate about sustainability my entire life. And I think it comes from an ethos of helping others see themselves in this movement. So that started actually with the city of Atlanta. I worked to build out their urban agriculture campaign. From there, I focused on environmental policy. I explored work with the United Nations Development Program, decided that was a little bit too big for me. And from there, I actually joined a film production company. I spent some time with the company called Exposure Labs. We're behind The Social Dilemma, Chasing Coral, if you're familiar. And we took those big stories, and my role is to help others see themselves in that story. So we brought those films to communities across the American Southeast and engaged in conversations around how to connect the dots to local policy. From there, I realized that there was opportunities to make an even bigger difference and found my way to Better Earth, where I've been for the last 5 years, where we are really trying to push the needle and engage across the food service industry in this conversation around regenerative circularity.
That's incredible.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's a really interesting journey. Thanks for updating us here. I know we talked about it before we started recording here, but can you talk to us a little bit more about Better Earth? I know you mentioned that the company has now achieved B Corp status. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the importance of sustainability and packaging in the restaurant industry?
I'd be happy to. So, starting with our B Corp status, when we last spoke in December, we were on the precipice of a lot of exciting things. So, I couldn't talk about it yet. So, I am so excited to be able to share some of our big news with your community. So, Better Earth recently was accredited with the prestigious B Corp certification. What that means is that we are joining an incredible group of peers, organizations that are leading the charge in environmental and social governance. This is a very rigorous process to become a B Corp. I'm talking about several hundred questions in an initial assessment, background checks, continued audits, and quality assurance in order to get to this stage. For us, it was a well over 15-month process. And as it should be rigorous. This is the most recognized symbol for environmental and social leadership among both American and Canadian consumers. And so we are very excited to have finally gotten that. And as part of that too, we are also excited about the launch of our climate smart packaging collection. We were able to get a life cycle assessment of our farmers fiber line, which I think I might have spoken to y'all about in our last conversation. That is where we partner with a network of over 40 American farmers and landowners to grow native and regenerative grasses that we ultimately manufacture into that farmers fiber collection. We put that product on the eco scale, so to speak, and figured out its environmental footprint. We were surprised to learn that it is incredibly low. So as part of our climate smart packaging process, it goes through a rigorous 3-step approach. Number one is stepping on that scale, completing an ISO compliant life cycle assessment. The second is the development of a decarbonization plan. And third is for any remaining emissions, purchasing carbon offsets. So our Farmers Fiber Collection has gone through that journey, and we are excited to share that as well.
Amazing. Congratulations on the new B Corp status.
Yeah.
That is quite the accomplishment. And I can only imagine the rigors that they put you through. So, Jose?
You previously discussed the role of staff in sustainability. How can restaurant owners and managers create zero waste ambassadors among their staff? And what training have you found most effective in fostering a culture of sustainability within a restaurant?
Absolutely. Sustainability initiatives have to be grassroots driven, right? They have to be owned by all of us in order to be successful. So at the restaurant level, because there's so many different stakeholders involved in the management of that organic material through the restaurant, engaging staff is key. So after a restaurant has done the work to really understand their current packaging mix and explored options for transitioning their waste management systems, that's a really great time to then begin to engage staff. You'll probably be surprised to learn that most staff will be very eager and excited to be part of this conversation and excited that the restaurant is moving forward in this direction. So engaging staff to see who will become zero waste ambassadors, right? Who will help lead the charge and engage their own communities and their own peers in this conversation. So training can often look like, first and foremost, bringing in that waste provider, right? Whether it's your local recycler or composter, to the restaurant to initiate a waste audit, right? Getting out, pulling out the tarp and understanding what the waste is within your organization. That will help you drive towards your end results and understanding what action looks like, and allow your staff to see the true volume that is there, right? It's once you see it out in front of you that you can understand, wow, if I extrapolate this across an entire year, what are we doing? Like, what is our impact to this broader conversation? You can see it's pretty big. So the opportunity to shift that is massive. And so after that waste audit, engaging staff with that waste management partner to train them around what exactly is compostable, right? What is the organic material? What is recyclable? And then what is landfill? Working with your staff to put bins in strategic locations that fall within their standard operating procedures, right? Making this effortless and part of their day rather than adding another step in what is otherwise an incredibly busy operation. We don't need to add more work to restaurant staff. I think we can all agree to that. So putting bins in effortless ways that are part of their existing flow, and then engaging them on the results, right? Celebrating together your impact. Most composting providers as well as recyclers can share the total pounds diverted from landfill and engage your staff in that conversation and celebrate it with them.
What a great opportunity for leadership and self-celebration. I think that we, in general, human beings, don't do enough of. Good for me.
Just to add to that, I mean, we have Jason E. Brooks, who is a regular on our show. He talks about something similar. He talks about creating mini GMs in the training process and really informing them of the big picture of what that organization or what that business is trying to accomplish. And I think this is right in line with that. When you're creating zero waste ambassadors, you're creating someone who's a part of the ecosystem that is that business. And so I think that's a fantastic approach to training and involving everyone. Switching gears a little bit here, Savannah, if we could talk about packaging legislation, because that impacts restaurateurs a great deal as well. Can you revisit some of the key packaging legislation in 2024 restaurateurs need to be aware of? Are these being implemented? Did they go through? And what about 2025 looking forward?
Certainly, yes. Restaurateurs are certainly going to have to stay up to speed on different packaging legislation within the United States specifically, as well as how that translates to Canada and other regions. There's a few key trends to keep in mind, as well as verbiage and lingo to know as you're navigating this kind of legislation. First and foremost is EPR, or extended producer responsibility. This is a big buzzword and it's not going away. EPR means that producers, right? All producers, Better Earth included, of widgets, of the single-use packaging that restaurateurs are using, EPR is now having them pay towards the disposal of that item, right? Up until recently, us as taxpayers have been paying that burden. And this type of model allows for the shifting of that burden to those that manufactured those items. Now, there's an additional layer to that, which is called eco-modulation. Most restaurateurs are going to have to worry about this. I'm just going to dive into the weeds a bit. Eco-modulation means that those fees are going to be modulated based upon the sustainability profile of that packaging going into that market. So what this does is it helps finally turn the tide and shift the needle towards more sustainable options. Because until recently, right, styrofoam is incredibly inexpensive. It's way more accessible because of that. Same for single-use plastic. Now, when you add in fees for more unsustainable items, you're able to pivot the economics of it, and those sustainable alternatives become a lot more accessible, become a lot less expensive because their fees are less than the unsustainable alternatives. So we are really excited to see extended producer responsibility continue to roll out. To your question around what's happening and what's next, we already have several states in the United States that have passed extended producer responsibility legislation. That includes Maine, Colorado, California, and recently Minnesota. You are seeing states like Washington and New York continue to explore EPR, and I can perceive that they will be following suit within 2025 or soon thereafter. Now, most of the states have been in the grace period after passing EPR. They've also finally begun to bring on an organization that will help facilitate that legislation. So across the United States, there's actually one organization that has been selected for all of these states. It's CAA, or the Circular Action Alliance. Any large restaurateur who wants to stay up to speed on EPR should absolutely go to the CAA website to learn more. And so with that, we are now beginning to see needs assessments come out, and states are learning where their waste infrastructure is at and what funds are really needed in order to bring recycling and composting infrastructure up to speed. So that is EPR in a bit of a nutshell. You're also continuing to see it explored in Canada too. And EPR is already well underway in the European Union. Truth in labeling laws are another big trend in this space. What you're beginning to see is finally action being taken to standardize labeling across packaging. I think we can all agree that packaging can be very confusing. With any of us standing in front of a bin and trying to figure out where to put something, I mean, I definitely take note to watch people at those bins and then go over and try to assist them, because it's really overwhelming and you don't know what to do. And because recycling, especially in the United States, is so hyper regionalized, you can't really know for sure what goes where based upon the space that you're in. So truth in labeling laws is taking a first step to finally standardize the labeling across different packaging types. This will be huge in many ways. Not only will it help address confusion among consumers, it's also going to finally help address contamination, because when we don't know where stuff goes, we put it in the wrong bin. And then when that stuff finally gets to where it needs to go, it's so contaminated that the other items can't be properly recycled or composted. So it's a lose, lose, lose across the way. So with truth in labeling laws, you're going to see for compostable items, compostable clearly visible. You'll begin to see color schemes like brown and green, and then you'll see the language and third-party certification very visible as well. So within the compostable packaging industry, the leading certifiers are the Biodegradable Products Institute and the Compost Manufacturing Alliance. So you'll see these labels very visible. It's really important to be on the lookout for these types of labels and indicators, because if someone's trying to share or advertise that their packaging is natural or biodegradable, it could be greenwashing and it could be a contaminant in the compost bin. So those are two, I would say, key legislative trends to be on the lookout for, but happy to elaborate further.
No, thanks for that. I can, from experience, I was recently at a baseball game and I wanted to recycle some of the stuff that I was consuming there. And I went to the bins and there were 5 different bins. And I was confused and I wanted to get back to my seat. And, I'm sitting there, I'm like, if I'm confused, other people got to be confused. So that definitely needs to be a little bit more clear for the average person to figure out where their waste needs to go, right?
Absolutely. And from a restaurant's perspective, you want to create as seamless of an experience for your guests as possible, right? Especially for restaurants in the quick service space. You want it to be easy. You want them to go in, enjoy their food, drop it off, and leave. And so as we think about systems of the future, there's huge opportunity to think about, right, reusable items for dine-in only. That's another big trend happening in California, municipalities and others, as well as 100% compost options. Because when you have 100% compostable packaging, you don't need to worry about the waste because it all goes in one bin, food waste and packaging included. And talk about an effortless and frictionless experience for guests.
And that would
Love it.
reduce the footprint within the restaurant itself as well. If you're minimizing bins, absolutely. I think that's great.
I'm super guilty on being confused every time. Like even at the simpler models, like in Canada, I'm always confused. But I think you said something very important, and probably one of the most important pieces is the interest of our audience here when it comes to the consumer psychology. And I remember last time you briefly touched on consumer perception. I'm sure, and so now what I would like to know is when it comes to compostable molded fiber versus non-compostable options, what impact does this have on their dining experience and restaurant choice?
Yes, there is a strong consumer psychology element to this as well. Beyond the sheer sustainability side of compostable packaging, it is of interest as a premium option to consumers. So as we talked about last time, I just encourage all of us to put ourselves in this environment. Think about, one of your favorite sandwiches, and think about it first, if you close your eyes and think about it in a styrofoam package. And then, all right, so there it is. And then think about it in a nice molded fiber packaging. If you put them side by side, which one would you choose? Which one, if you look at it, which one would you think had invested more in quality, both in terms of the packaging as well as the ingredients? And from my own experience, I can say that, hey, if that restaurant is investing across the board, then I can feel assured that they're investing in their ingredients and the quality of that menu item as well. Because it is, no pun intended, the full package, right? And you don't want to cut corners, right? Even though within the restaurant industry, they are running on thin margins. So I will be the first to say that. But if you're thinking about consumer perception, if you're thinking about really gaining consumer trust, packaging matters. And it is the final bow in the consumer experience with that menu item. So Jose, what you were referencing is a very interesting marketing study that found and proved the exact experience that I was just describing, that when consumers were provided the exact same menu item side by side in an clamshell and a molded fiber clamshell, they approved of the molded fiber item more than the EPS item, and they had the assumption that it was of higher quality just because of the packaging that it's in. And that's very powerful too. Again, it just goes back to investing across the value chain. And I think too, going full circle to this idea of being a B Corp, and it goes back to organizational values. It's just thinking about the details at every step of the way.
And that makes a lot of sense. To be honest, personally, find that I feel like, let's say if it was styrofoam, I like that when I'm grabbing it, I'm releasing little pieces of it. How sometimes when things are hot and it just, for any particular combination of sauces or why not, and it melts a bit, that's scary.
Yeah, we don't want little pieces of styrofoam in our sandwiches. It was so acceptable for so long.
Exactly. You should have every right to be concerned, to be honest. And, into the community on this show, styrofoam has come to be known as a known carcinogen by the World Health Organization. Its status was actually elevated in the last couple of years. There is study after study that has shown that it is detrimental to human health and is correlated with several, scary conditions. So there is every reason to be concerned about it. And I think that also plays a role in perception. Now, on the flip side, certified compostable packaging undergoes rigorous testing because by definition, compostable packaging must not only break down in 90 to 180 days, but it must leave no toxicity to the soil, right? Because it's breaking down into a nutrient-rich soil amendment for agriculture. So you can be rest assured in that as well.
That's
Thank you for the
amazing.
peace of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And with everything we know about microplastics and styrofoam, it just makes perfect sense to naturally begin to transition towards compostable packaging, from a consumer standpoint, from a health standpoint, from a business perspective. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Savannah, that's all the time we have for this episode today, but now's your time to plug away. Where can people connect with you? What's your platform of choice?
Absolutely. Folks can find us at Be Compostable, BE Compostable across social media, as well as www.com.
Fantastic. Speaking of plugs, this podcast is sponsored by Dine Pricing, real-time restaurant profitability. Dine Pricing uses artificial intelligence to improve restaurant profitability by dynamically updating menus across digital channels like Uber Eats, DoorDash, and Grubhub. Again, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks again to Savannah for joining us. Until next week, say goodbye, Jose.
Thank you for keeping it green, and goodbye.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Savannah.